I would like to introduce you to Coco! That's right, this is a 1989 BMW E30 325 IS. This is an S52 swapped E30 with a 5-speed D-track transmission on it. This is as original as it gets with exception to the engine, and we're gonna be doing a lot of work to this thing, guys. This is a rust-free 1989 325 IS, and Adam Tompkins, our new customer, wants me to do as much of a factory restore on this as possible. Now we're gonna be leaving the S52, we're gonna be cleaning up everything inside this engine bay and polishing it and making it look like it actually lives in here. We're gonna be replacing the windshield and going through that, show you how to do that. We're gonna be taking care of a little bit of rust on the front windshield cowling, but we're not gonna be replacing it like we did with that E30 M3. Let's take a look inside. So inside, we're gonna be doing a pretty significant update involving, number one, the dash. The dash is old and cracked, very common on E30s, and we're gonna be replacing it with a perfect condition E30 dash. We'll be doing odometer cluster gauge repair. We'll be doing all these switch refreshes. We're gonna be doing seat shocks, sunroof work. I mean, I'm telling you, we're gonna be basically taking care of most all of the common issues that you will find on your E30, all right here in a concise couple videos. Now, what you see here in terms of wheels and tires is gonna be one of the biggest upgrades we make. Actually, we're not gonna be upgrading the wheels at all. We're gonna be keeping these E38 style 5s. Currently, these are 5x120 with a 20 millimeter adapter to go to 4x100. We're actually gonna be doing a true 5x120 swap using the clips, hubs, front and rear, and we're gonna be upgrading to Wilwood brakes, all of our brakes, in fact. Everything's gonna be completely updated. Calipers, larger 310 and 295 millimeter rotors, and we're gonna be getting this offset inward so that the actual wheels and tires look like it belongs in this car and it's not sticking out with an incredibly low offset. Now, the front end's gonna be transformed quite a bit, but in a very modest way. Nowadays, a lot of these E30 owners are older like myself, and that's the kind of customer that I attract, is to bring in customers that want a modest, updated look to their E30. In this case, we're gonna be replacing these, and we're gonna be going to ellipsoids. In fact, we're gonna be going to French yellow ellipsoids, not only on the headlights, but on the fog lights. We're gonna be putting a nice IS lip on it, and we're gonna be repainting and refreshing the entire front end, including a repaint of the hood and the sunroof. So underneath the car, we're gonna be making a lot of changes. Most notably being the rear suspension. We're gonna be replacing all of the bushings on the rear suspension. We're gonna be refreshing it. We're gonna be replacing the rear shocks. We have full coilover setup right now. The CA tuned Gen 1 coilover setup for the E30. He's very happy with this, so we're gonna keep it. But all the bushings in the rear are going to be replaced. The exhaust is in really good shape, actually. And all we need to do on the exhaust side is just install some better positioned oxygen sensors for serviceability. On the front end is more of the same story, where we're gonna be replacing the control arms and the sway bar bushings and the control arm bushings and everything underneath. Not to mention, of course, we're gonna be putting an oil pan guard underneath to protect the S52 oil pan from any types of speed bumps or anything else that might come and hit the oil pan and damage it. We're gonna be replacing the oil pan gasket on the S52, and I forgot to mention that we're gonna be getting the R134A retrofitted into this setup, which is gonna be a really big plus for our customer who really values a very comfortable drive in the summer with nice, cool AC. Now, before we start tearing into this thing, I wanna see how it drives. I wanna identify any technical nuances that I need to address that might not have been covered in conversations with Adam. But more importantly, I wanna see how this thing just drives. I've never driven an S52 E30 before. So let's give it a shot. A little raspy. Oh my God, the brakes. The brakes are terrible, terrible. I'm so glad we're upgrading. All right. It's a real short shifter. I don't know if Adam's gonna like that so much. I'd like to change that to a little bit more of a comfortable shifter feel. And that means shortening the distance between the ball and the shifter itself. Seats are comfortable, but those seat shocks really need to be fixed. Keep in mind that the radio and everything in the radio, everything related to the radio is going to be getting completely revamped. That includes the radio head unit, the speakers, and of course we're going to be maintaining that 80s era antenna, that telescoping antenna that we all know and love. For a swapped E30, this thing does feel very close to its original roots though. Like I said, I think that the S52 is well paired with this chassis. And it still feels like an old ratty E30, but with a little bit more power than you'd like, than you'd remember from an E30. We definitely need a new blower motor resistor because the fan only works on speed high, and that's not good. So we have to fix that as well. The anti-lock braking light is on, so we gotta work on the ABS, and the check engine light is on. So I have to understand exactly if that's real from the S52, or if it's not real, and either remove the light, or go through OBD2. This is a 1999 S52 from an M3, so it should have OBD2. I haven't found the connector yet. That's it. Now that we're done with the test drive, all that's left to do is just about everything. We gotta start the demo. That's the thing, right? We gotta take the dash out, we gotta start working on the rear suspension. So where you see the car here is where it's going to live for at least the next 3 months. Thank you guys so much for watching. I don't know. I'm not doing an outro. The video is not over yet. We're still doing this.
Right. So, all you need is a stay tuned, right?
Just stay tuned, because in 2 seconds it's gonna start the demo. As you can see, in a really short amount of time, we were able to remove most of the interior, including the dashboard. We were able to expose a lot of the issues with the wiring. As you can see, they actually added like some sort of an aftermarket stereo system. So we need to remove all that, remove all the aftermarket wiring, and put in brand new wiring or replace with OEM. Over here, after we remove the windshield, you can see that there is a rust spot here. Luckily, it isn't too bad. All we need to do is probably just lay a couple of beads of weld on there and smooth it down, maybe put a little bit of filler on there, and then repaint this whole lower cowling. Since we're gonna be repainting the hood anyway, we can do it all at the same time. The next thing that we need to do is start removing the sunroof and remove the actual panel to see how bad the rust is underneath. We're probably going to be replacing that panel and painting that as well. So yeah, with all this work that we had to do on the dashboard, we had to take that whole HVAC panel out. I rewired a lot of that. We ended up reinstalling the recirculating motors correctly. You can see those two dashboards side by side. It's like night and day, the difference between the old and the new. So we had to take all the stuff from the old and transplant it over to the new before we reinstalled it. And we got a really good look at that heater core valve, and that was in bad shape. So we replaced that as well as the heater core, and then did a little bit of body work. So not only did I do a haircut change and a wardrobe change, but we're shifting gears to the seats. Today we're going to be taking 9 stitches seat shocks. We've got the upper seat shocks and we've got the base shocks. We're going to be replacing them so that this thing actually acts better than OEM, because these are actually stronger than the OEM shocks. They're not going to be very easy to replace or easy to access, but they're not going to be easy to replace. And today we're going to be replacing them, and we're going to get these seats feeling brand new again. One thing to note on these seats that actually makes them so wobbly as they age is the fact that these two Phillips heads are actually the securing mounting hardware for the back part of the seat to the front. So if you look right here, you'll see I'm just tightening this up really easily here, just like with a couple twists. It's really, and that's what makes this thing feel loose like that. So to remove this, now that you've got the cables removed here, all you gotta do is loosen these guys up, and the whole seat just slides up. Now you can separate the two halves. Look at this. Dead ski. Glad we're replacing them. So actually replacing the shocks was really, really easy. All we needed to do was buy a DeWalt, like a 600-pound indexing clamp. That all you have to do is the more you clamp it, the more that it pushes the shock in, and it's actually got little holes in it, so the shock actually can sit inside of those holes so it doesn't spit out at you. It was actually a really, really clever way to do it, and it worked out super, super easy. And then all we had to do is just put the seats together, and from then on, we were basically ready to go. Reassembly was the reverse of the removal, and everything worked out really well, and the seats they just turned out like perfect. Very, very happy with the way that they turned out. Today we're going to be taking them to powder worth, and we're going to be getting these things powder coated, cleaning up, powder coating, and we're going to be doing like a clear coat on top of that. It should take about a couple weeks to get them done. Now let's get back in the garage and talk about the next thing on the list. So now we're back at the shop. And as you can see, I'm having some audio issues. So we're working through that right now to get better audio on all of the videos. As you can probably tell, it's been subpar. We'll work on that. But we are back at the shop, and my friend Eli has been working on the sunroof. Now we're moving over to the bodywork, which is basically, we've done the metal work here already. We just need to smooth it over with some glaze. We're gonna be doing some sanding as well, and then we're gonna prime over it. But what Eli is doing right now is he's mixing our dolphin glaze. It's kind of like a polyurethane glaze. And essentially what this is just a really thin coat that we're going to put over here, and we're going to feather it out on either side, and then we're going to sand it down after it all dries. And when we're done with that and it's nice and smooth, we're going to end up putting a coat of primer on it. We're going to sand the whole thing down, make it nice and uniform, and then it should be ready for paint. Perfect, just like that. So just feeling into this. Oh, this feels pretty good so far. Yep. Yeah. And this right here is just, yeah, it looks like you're pretty deep. So I wouldn't even do another coat here. Right. But definitely here, we got to smooth this out and make sure this is nice. This right here can probably get cut down pretty good, and then we'll put another layer on. All right, so we've got everything wired up, rewired up, and ready to go for our dash install. Now, a couple of notes before we install the dash is you have to make sure that all of your wiring is completed. All the connectors are ready to go. Everything's been kind of moved to the side of where they need to go. All of your instrument cluster, center console type wiring is put in place, and that your instrument cluster wiring is basically kind of together so that you can pull it through. Good to check your functionality of your recirculation motors and get your glove box installed beforehand. It's actually quite easy to install it regardless, but good to have that done beforehand. And finally, any bulbs that need to be checked. We've checked all of our bulbs, and all of them look good. We've replaced the ones that were bad, but we've hooked up power and we tested and dimmed all the bulbs. So we've got the headlight switch installed in order to dim the bulbs. And we got our new foam gasket on our HVAC. The last thing you really want to do, and very, very important, is to install your AC lines. Do it now before you install the dash. It's so much easier to install them. Don't forget about the new O-rings. In this case, we're using the green O-rings for the R134A. Now that we've removed the A-pillars, the A-pillar covers, and we remove them to make the dash install easier, we can now start and install the dash. Okay, so the dashboard is now installed. Don't forget that when you do this, whether there's a front windshield in there or not, that there is a clip that goes in the center, and all you need to do is pull this back, and can't really do this with one hand, but push down, and it should stay in place. And now the rest of the windshield should cover any other type of issues or whatever. But the dashboard is basically in. I will show you the 4 screws that you need to put in, the main screws that you need to put in on each of the side frame rails on the A-pillars. And from then on, it's just a matter of going through, getting the 2 A-pillars in right there, and then doing the instrument cluster. So we'll just do some time lapses, and I'll do some voiceovers on that. So when installing the HVAC panel, it's really important to remember to snake all of your wires through as you're kind of putting it in. The best thing to do here to start is to start with the radio wires. And here we have a lot of radio wires. We've got this guy going to the OBC. We've got this guy for radio. We've got an antenna wire coming through. And we have, of course, RCAs.
You kind of need to fiddle around with this a little bit. To properly install the HVAC panel, you need a screw right up in there, another one right up in there, and you have two underneath, one there and then one there. And then the whole HVAC panel is sitting in place. Now that we've got all the wires snaked through, all that's really needed to do here is just put the two buttons on, and then all of the slider switches with the front mounting bracket, and it should be good. I'll show you that in a sec.
So you can see we've got most of the dashboard reinstalled. And we started on the center console. We're gonna take a break from the interior for a little bit and start working on the wheel hubs. Now the wheel hubs are actually a 4x120 to 4x100 to 5x120 adapters that literally had so much, it was really difficult to remove these guys. Let me show you what they look like. So these are the 4x100 to 5x120 adapters. I got two of them off, which are basically those two. So we're gonna start removing the brakes and the rotors in order to expose the hubs and remove that as well, and the bearings. On the other side, Dan is working on right now, trying to get those really difficult bolts out. So we're gonna start working on suspension and brakes here, and we'll be bouncing back and forth, but we'll get there. We'll get there. So now that that's off, we need to take the parking brake stuff off so that we can then pull the hub out. Okay, we're back at Powderworth. Now let's see how these wheels turned out. Again, just a standard silver with a gloss powder coat, but they were all completely blasted prior. I think these guys did a great job. Let's take a look. So a really nice silver with a clear coat on top. So it's literally a base clear of a powder coat from Powderworth. They did a really great job on these wheels. And now we're gonna have Don Zhang. Don's gonna be putting the tires on for me. We're probably gonna end up going with a 215 45s on these as opposed to the 205 50s that we had on before. We're gonna give it a little bit of a wider stance at the cost of height, but I think it'll be really nice. We've basically removed everything on the front end. It was just deconstruction. I didn't really want to bore you with the details of all that. But we do have a lot of new suspension components. I've refreshed the steering rack. I have to update the steering reservoir location. That's all been done. On the rear end, that's all been removed as well. I'm going to be replacing these shocks with new. We've got new bushings. I've got all the parts over there, but basically we dropped everything. We're going to clean it, put new bushings on, and reinstall all of the rear end. What's going on over here is the plastic is to allow us to paint, and we are painting this lower cowling here. It's not very glossy right now, and that's because of the clear coat that hasn't been put on. We just put the base coat on. I wanted to see how that would lay down. There's a couple of things I want to change about that. Maybe sand it down, maybe lay another coat of base down in order to make sure that it's good before we lay the clear down, but that's why I've got the plastic here. Once that's done, we can then put the gasket on for the windscreen and put the windshield back on. This guy is here because we are hanging the engine. We're hanging the engine because we had to remove the subframe, and we also replaced the oil pan gasket. This thing was leaking like a sieve, so we wanted to replace it. Finally, as you guys can probably see, there is no hood. Why is there no hood? Well, that's the first thing that we're removing because we're going to send that one out to paint, along with the new sunroof panel, which we have stored over there. We also are going to be removing the lower valence and having a little bit of work done to that so we can get our IS lip installed and we can get this thing set. So you can see here that I've got the bolts, the 8mm screws out here, 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 behind the ducting, and on both sides actually. And now it's going to start getting pretty loose. Essentially, it's being held in by the fender. So if I were to pull this fender back just a tiny bit, you can see that the whole thing kind of just drops now. So now we can take this off and we can send that onto paint. Got to remove the fog lights. We're going to be replacing the fog lights. We're going to be replacing the headlights. And we're going to be painting all this to make it look super nice.